Here I was in a situation where I was working unbelievably hard, but young and vibrant, excited, and yet I wasn't taking care of my own needs because I was so busy being busy. They're looking for opportunity in a what or a how. They read these how-to books and they kind of go, well, should I start a Subway shop, or should I start a hamburger joint, or maybe I should begin some sort of an online store, or perhaps I could open up a bar or something of that nature. Well, the reality is there's a lot of ideas out there, but until you get your why properly structured in your mind, you understand where it is you're at now, where do you want to be in 5 or 10 years, how do you want to design your life, what do you want it to be about. When you learn how to do that and decide what your why is and how you really want to live, then the how and the what begin to come together for you. And so there's a great book out there. It's called It Starts With Why by Simon Sinek. He's a social scientist, wrote this incredible book. Starts with why, and then the what and the how. He's got a great 15-minute talk that he does on TED Talks on YouTube. So I encourage you to write that down. TED Talks, YouTube, Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, and listen to It Starts With Why. And in 14 minutes, you're going to hear something very compelling, very convincing that you may never have heard before. Now, when I was a millennial, the equivalent of a millennial in my 20s, late 20s thereabouts, I was a medical doctor. And my why was purpose-driven, based on I want to be involved in the medical sciences. I want to learn how to heal people, help people, add value to their life in some way in the health sciences. And at that time, I became conflicted because I was so busy being busy trying to run the business of medicine. I did not have a sense of purpose in treating my patients because I was double-minded. Oh, I've got to make $50,000 a month in order to cover the overhead just to keep the doors open, to pay for the employees. I had 10 employees. I had 800 patients I had to see a month. 40, 50, 60 patients a day. And so, my gosh, I was the one packing the water, so to speak. I was the one that was going door to door, 6 doors in a row, door 1 through 6, and I would do that 6, 7, 8 times in a day, having to get up at 5:30 or 6:30 in the morning and get to work there at 7:30 in the morning at the hospital, and then work in my office. And so I'm here to tell you that hard work is important, and hard work will also own your life. And a lot of people work hard working for somebody else's dream. I worked hard for my business. My business owned me. I didn't own my business. So somebody handed me a book called The Magic of Thinking Big. And when I read that book by a doctor who wrote it, it began to open up my mind to the possibilities of what could it be like to think bigger, think beyond the scope of, oh, I'm a medical doctor, oh, I've got a degree, oh, I'm MD, I've got my stethoscope, my percussion hammer, oh, I've got my white lab coat, oh, patients come to me because they need help, but could I possibly think outside that box? And then the next book that was handed to me was called Think and Grow Rich by a famous author named Napoleon Hill. Some of you never heard of him. Way before your time. Book was written 80 years ago, 70 years ago, and it was a compilation of a document that was almost 1,200 pages called The Law of Success, and he trimmed it down to a book, 230 or 40 pages, called Think and Grow Rich. There's a chapter in there on how to develop a desire, how to develop a burning desire. Because keep in mind, as we get into the work world, we get our education and we focus on working for this company or that company, the other company, or trying to find our way. We get so busy paying the bills, making a living, we really lose sight of a bigger purpose, something that really is passionate, that really pulls us, as opposed to being pushed by fear, pushed by economic need. Imagine the power of being pulled by a vision. So here I was at that point in my life, and I was beginning to question the future. What would it be like? Things happen in people's lives that we can't necessarily predict. As a matter of fact, I just read an article today in this particular journal right here, this USA Today, that was talking about people, where they're going to be in 10 years. And the question asked them was, do you think you'll have better health in 10 years or worse health in 10 years? only 37% said, I think I'll have good or better health in 10 years. So there's a lot of people that are worried and concerned and expecting, oh my gosh, things may not be so good 5 or 10 years from now. So with all that being said, I would lead you to one other source of information that'll help you kind of project to the future. And again, it's a TED Talk. It's on YouTube. And it's called Workplace Crisis 2030. And the Workplace Crisis 2030 is discussed by a social scientist who is a German that understands the metrics very well, and he puts forth a very compelling argument for the fact that 72 million baby boomers, of which I'm in that category, are going to retire, and 86 million millennials are not. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen to the vacuum that's created by that? And so there's worry amongst people in the world today as to what will the future hold economically. Well, here's what I'm going to tell you right now. Call me an optimist, call me a wishful thinker. I believe opportunity today is greater than ever before. Somebody taking care of me last night, driving me around from point A to point B. This young man, he works for something called Postmates. It's a part-time deal where he picks up food at restaurants, kind of like Uber, kind of like Lyft, and delivers the food to the people and gets paid a fee for each delivery that he does and gets tips, etc. So lots of stuff is coming. I'm going to talk to you about cutting-edge technology combined with cutting-edge marketing. We're going to talk to you about some alliances that we work in that are absolutely astounding, that are going to be right on the cutting edge of what I just described to you. And yes, we have great companies like Amazon and great companies like Walmart and Costco and companies like eBay, et cetera, and Alibaba out of China. We're going to talk to you about an opportunity that's going to be not for you to be employed, an opportunity for you to strike out on your own. Own your own piece of the turf by building your own distribution system on the World Wide Web in 100+ countries around the world. So anyhow, here I was going back to when I was 28 years of age. I was struggling. I was struggling with the fact my dad had worked for 50 years as a dentist, and he was burned up from the time he was 45 years on until the day he retired at 70 years of age and passed away about 8 or 9 years later. I was struggling with the idea of working as hard as I had to work and ever increasing command of the gold. He or she or they that own the gold, called the insurance companies, the government, the purse strings, are controlled by somebody else. And I began to think to myself, as they compressed further and further on the fee structure, I began to say, I'm going to have to see more and more patients, try to do more and more procedures. And I began to feel like I was being squeezed further and further and further. So I became, at that point in time, open-minded enough to say, there's other things I need to consider doing. Not that I don't like being a doctor, I just don't like running the business of being a doctor. So one of the things that was instrumental for me was I had a Jewish grandfather that was adopted. He adopted me. He's got a good Irish Catholic Jewish name, Steinberg. So Babe Steinberg was the grandfather of a good friend of mine. And my good friend Robin and I used to hang out with Babe Steinberg late at night, Saturday nights, Sunday nights, and eat all kinds of cool food, matzo ball soup, pickled herring, and just had a ball, with lox and bagels and capers. And he was a storyteller, an unbelievable storyteller. My dad was not a storyteller. He would just sit around the dinner table and say, hey, we're spending too much money. Money doesn't grow on trees. Money burns a hole in your pocket, David. And money flows through your fingers. And we've got to be on an austerity program. And the people that have all that money over on the other side of town, they're doing something wrong to get all that money. So I was raised in an economic DNA of lack. And Robin was raised in an economic DNA of lack from his father, kind of like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki. But his granddad marched to the beat of a different drummer. No college education, just guts and gumption and determination, and he was a pioneer. So he'd done so many cool things, made millions, lost millions, made millions, lost millions, and here's what he said, boys, he says, if you'll just listen to Granddad Babe here and take some of these steps at some point in your life, you'll learn how to command your income in such a way that money doesn't own you, you own money. You own your own life. And I began to think about those things and say to myself, well, but my dad said, my mom said, and Robin thought the same thing, and I began to kind of scratch my head because I was trained to believe I had to get a good profession, get a good education. And I'm not opposed to that. However, he planted a seed inside of me, and here's what he said, David, just remember, there's 11 commandments. I said, really, babe? I said, I'm not a real biblical guy, but I know there's 10. He says, well, I've got the 11th. Thou shalt buy wholesale. Well, if Babe Steinberg was alive today, he passed away about 15 years ago. Wonderful man, Penny. Well, you would have loved him. Wonderful man. You'll meet his grandson one day. If Babe Steinberg was alive today, and he was sitting here, he would be looking at this so intently and so excited about what we were talking about. And here's what I would say to Babe. Babe, you're wrong. There's 12 commandments. He goes, 12 commandments? I said, 12 commandments, babe. The 12th commandment is thou shalt get paid to buy wholesale. And Babe would go, now that's a great idea. Didn't think of it. I think I'll write that down and use that principle. So we're going to talk about how to do that and put that into economic increase with an exponential growth curve. And there are ways to create viral marketing. There are ways to create viral growth in a business. If you've ever read the book Tipping Point by another great social scientist, a Torontonian from my University of Toronto, Malcolm Gladwell, he wrote a book called Tipping Point and discussed a number of different stories of ideas of things that reached a tipping point, and he analyzed exactly why, what it was. I encourage you to read the book. So anyhow, so when I was 28 years of age, I was buying rental properties. I was buying everything on time. I had debt up the wazoo. I couldn't get the renters to pay, and I was running out of money before I ran out of month. And so I was under a lot of stress and a lot of pressure, but I was still optimistic about the future, and I knew I needed to be diversified. So consequently, I ran into a group of people while I was going through some of that turmoil that said, hey, I got some ideas I want to talk to you about. And we sat down and talked. I met a guy that was 36 years of age with no college education that had commanded his financial future by the time he was 29 years of age. By the time he was 36, he looked straight at me and he says, unless you make $60,000 a month, you ain't got nothing to tell me about how to make money. And I'm looking at that going, legal? Illegal? Who cares? I was interested. I was curious that a man at 36 years of age with no college education could become a multimillionaire and have freedom in his life. And then I met a bunch of people that would be equivalent today of millennials that were younger than me. I mean, I was 28. Some of these people were like 22, 23, 24. And I began to sit down and go, you know what? There's other ways to make money besides fee-for-service as a doctor. That's all I knew. You know, I mean, I worked as a bank teller one time. I worked, putting together above ground pools. I was a garbage man. I did a number of things as a kid, dug ditches and so forth, wages. But I never really understood the power of what Robert Kiyosaki described in his book, Business of the 21st Century. That's another book I'd write down, Business of the 21st Century. He's going to take the Industrial Revolution and the Digital Revolution, put them together, and discuss with you how to have the maximum amount of leverage in marketing and distribution and creating profitability. So, Kiyosaki, of course, talks about a B quadrant, owning and operating a big business. A big business, which is a business system. So we're going to deflect from the responsibility of building warehouses and corporate entities and having to have all the back-end ownership and be involved with research and development ourselves and have to put together all the players in the back end of distribution. What we're going to do is we're going to outsource. We're going to talk to you about how to outsource a business and maximize on what somebody else has created. Just like, I don't know about you, Glenn, but when I fire my car up and you fire your car up, I don't think you're looking under the engine going, well, I think I need to know how to change every spark plug and every fan belt and, retune that computer before I turn that thing on. If you need to have the oil changed, typically you're going down to the oil lube place. You don't need to know everything about a car to use a car. You don't need to know everything about a business to utilize a business. Like that iPhone looking at me right now, hey, it's a miracle product. This iPhone has opened up my life to the entire planet. It's opened me up to multitudes of ideas for distribution marketing as it has to most other people. The problem is most people only see it for perhaps social media. Oh, I can talk to my friends about what kind of pie I had last night. Oh, isn't that a cute picture of Johnny? Which is fine, which is nice. And I was at the baseball game with my kid. And that's cool and that's nice. But how about thinking outside that box? How about thinking about how to use digital technology to create ongoing flows of income? Well, to make a long story short, I teamed up with these folks and we began to move along a journey of re-engineering what we were doing till finally the tipping point hit with digital distribution and digital marketing. And 22 years ago, which is hard to believe, Glenn, 22 years ago, I don't know if you were at my retirement party, but 22 years ago, April and I made a decision when the kids were little. Johnny was about, 8, Aaron was about 5, and we said, hey, it's time. it's time to take a sabbatical. Now that sounds like a professor talking about, I'm going to take a sabbatical and go study abroad or something. In my case, it was, I just needed to get out of the grind for a while. So I took a year off, then 2 years off, and then I signed a contract, and I had an automatic renewal, kind of a part of the contract that allowed me to continue to renew my retirement from the field of medicine. So it's been 22 years, gone by that fast. That's why I say to you, where are you going to be in 10 years if you keep doing what you're doing? I stopped doing what I was doing and added something to it. And consequently, I was in a position, by being focused, being intent in what I was doing, and taking the steps necessary, that I was able to then depart from my regular get up, go to work, pay the bills.